So what are your thoughts then on the strikes?
I just think, haven't the British public been through enough? We've just gone through a lockdown. The economy is in absolute state. And now we're basically being pitted against each other. I don't think it's bad that people want a pay rise. I think that's rational. I think people should be ambitious. And I don't think it's unfair that people complain. Again, I think after lockdown, after Christmas, people want to enjoy their time with their family. People want to travel. People want to, enjoy this country after lockdown. But we've not been able to. And now this has just made it worse.
Do you think, Jess, you would... I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying in terms of our sympathy for the striking workers. And I think that pushing this through, all of this action before Christmas, as we've seen actually with the airports, it's not really making any difference. It turns out that the armed forces are better at that job than the border force people themselves. That's slightly backfired on them. But in terms of public transport, our train network, the public are losing sympathy, I think, because they held these strikes in the run-up to Christmas. Do you think that the RMT and other unions should have waited until the new year and then they might have taken the public with them?
I think, again, I have sympathy for the strikers. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting a pay rise, especially when you're up against the government. In the public sector, strikers are holding the country hostage. It's against the taxpayer rather than a general business. If Amazon goes on strike, you can always go to eBay. But what are you going to do when all the trains are on strike? I know the trains aren't really public, but even Keir Starmer has said that the rail is pretty much nationalised. And I think this is just a problem with government inefficiency. Quite frankly, I think if it moves, privatise it. If it doesn't move, privatise it. As my favourite economist, Walter Block, said, I think that's the way forward.
So you'd like to see a privatised NHS, for instance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the NHS is completely failing. What's the point of it being free at the point of use when no one can use it with the long waiting lines? It doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve the overworked staff, the doctors and nurses who are overworked and underpaid. It doesn't help the patients who desperately need the help. Who desperately need medical treatment. I think the NHS is this massive monopoly and we need to see it for what it is.
But there are times, Jess, when the NHS is superb. You cannot get better service anywhere in the world, particularly in an emergency situation. The NHS and the nurses and doctors who work there is superb under some circumstances.
I mean, I have no problem against the doctors and nurses. My mum's a midwife. I think the nurses and doctors are superb. I think the staff are one of the best things about this country. But I think the system isn't giving anyone a fair deal, quite frankly. And I think reform is desperately needed in all these sectors, especially the NHS. When it comes to people's health, I think that should be prioritised. It shouldn't be, at stake due to ideology.
Do you think your generation... How old are you, if you don't mind?
19.
So you're only 19. Blimey, my 19-year-old is sat at home probably now playing it. Well done for you being here. But do you think your generation are you typical, is what I'm saying, in terms of your generation thinking, well, the NHS will just be privatised, we don't feel it in our hearts? I think there are older generations that we feel that the NHS is something that was worth hanging on to. Do you think you're quite typical and thinking, well, we can live without it?
I don't think I'm quite typical. I think the average young person, let's be realistic, they don't really need to use healthcare as much as elderly people do. So I don't think they've given it much consideration. Again, the idea of the NHS is all coming together and paying for healthcare, so the poor get healthcare as well as the rich. I think that's a noble cause, but in reality, it just results in everyone worse off. Like Thatcher said, they don't care about the rich being... No, they don't care about the poor being poorer as long as it makes the rich poorer. I think that's true with the NHS.